My name is Lacey Leone McLaughlin, and this is Unfolding Leadership. It's my pleasure to introduce Bree Frank. She is an accomplished TV executive and advocate for people of color in media. Bree is passionate about creating opportunities for professionals of all backgrounds. With over 20 years of production experience, she has produced over 300 hours of unscripted television for brands that you would absolutely recognize, like MTV, TLC, and many others. In 2018, she took a leap of faith and moved her family to Los Angeles. Most recently, Bree was at Hello Sunshine, Reese Witherspoon's media company, as the Senior Vice President of Physical Production for Unscripted. Bree's passion to tell exceptional stories and move the television zeitgeist forward while championing diversity, equity, inclusion, and access is one of the things that make her unique. I'm excited to hear her story. Welcome, Bree. I'm thrilled to have you join us today.
Thank you so much for having me. If I had to say in short who I am, I'm just a girl from Queens. I was born,
which is big in itself, right?
Big in itself. I was born in Harlem, raised in Queens. I now live in LA. I've been here for now 5 years. I moved my family across the country in 2018. And who I am is like someone who's like consistently searching for the best version of myself and open to being wrong about it daily.
Which is perfect as we think about adult development. We're always developing, we're always moving forward, and we're always getting it wrong.
Yes, exactly. It's like permission to be wrong, not over-index. Like, I think that I've always like over-indexed on what success is, and now I weight success and failure equally.
Excellent, excellent. From a career and work perspective, what are you up to?
So right now, I'm working on my nonprofit, Hugh. I was just about to say I'm just working on my nonprofit, and then I corrected myself in my mind.
As you should.
So I'm working on my nonprofit, Hugh. It started as a Facebook group in 2017 that I built with just 27 people, and now we're at 22,000. And we've been doing some scaling, deeping into mentorship programs and defining our 3 pillars, which are curriculum, connection, and culture. And so I've had some amazing opportunities this year because I took a break from my big fancy job as a television executive. And so I've been kind of like on the circuit. I've been to Cannes and Martha's Vineyard and done a bunch of panels. And I'm just spending time like just trying to get the word out that like we're still doing the work and we have access to an amazing community. So my team and I are talking all the time about how to make ourselves better and how to create more access. And most importantly, the way that I define us is like we're gateways to the gatekeepers. So like always defining like what that looks like and how to just make us like bigger and better.
Yeah, excellent. So leaving that big job that you talked about and starting a not-for-profit is no small task by no means. But why? Why is this important to you? Why are you passionate about it? And get a little bit more specific around what you actually do.
Yeah. So Hugh officially became a nonprofit in 2020, right? It was a Facebook group that had all this activity. It was this meaningful place where people would commune and ask questions that they were afraid to say out loud. And just being in a shared community, it felt very clear that I could do much more than just be a Facebook group. And so from 2020, we started to have partners like National Geographic and CNN. And I think that I figured out a while ago that I had something to say and I was ready to say it out loud. That as a Black woman in television production, I was often the only person in the room that looked like me. And I did not have consistent access to mentors. And so I had found myself trying to like fill the gap for what I never had with so many people. And I wanted to do it at scale. And so what Hugh became was like an opportunity to like do what I love and like to give it away to thousands now, and to just respect the opportunities that I've had in this industry and to take that information and to not only have the conversations with my colleagues who had learned to respect my work, but also could introduce them to my passion around like equity and inclusion.
Got it. What a fascinating way to get there. So you talked about the Facebook group starting as a place where you could ask questions that you were afraid to ask.
Yes.
Give me an example of some of the questions that people were afraid to ask.
Yeah. So oftentimes you're like in this industry and everyone assumes that you like know all the things, but often it's just like a skill-based thing and you know how to do your job like as a producer, but you may not know what your rate is, what your rate should be. You may not know the right questions to ask for like how you are being treated on set. You might feel like I'm losing my mind, but I see the treatment of other people being different than the way I'm being treated. Am I going crazy? And then you're in a community of people who look like you go like, actually, you should ask for this much money. No, that's not normal. Here are your responsibilities. That actually belongs to this position. And then it allows the people to have agency and advocacy with the backing of people who are in this field, who are giving them bespoke advice based on understanding what the work is.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you have a time or a story that you remember going, oh, that's not normal. That's not consistent with my colleagues that don't look like me. Like, what was that time or thing or opportunity where you were like, oh, this is real?
Yeah, this is going to sound awful, but it's a true story.
Okay.
I was working somewhere for quite a bit of time, and I was doing the role that was probably at least 2 stations above where I was positioned.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd gone to a boss who I liked and said, hey, I'm doing this work. Actually, you brought someone in. I then trained him how to do the work to share with me because there was so much. And now they're leaving and they're advocating for me to get this title. And I would like this title. And I would love for you to give me this title because here is all the work that I'm doing that matches exactly what the person that's leaving doing. Will you give me this title? And they looked at me and they said, maybe when your kids get older. And that was like, well, now I'm in a precarious situation because I am a working mom. I can't just storm out the door and say, I don't want to do this anymore. So it's like, what do I do? So it's kind of like, it's an interesting position to be put in to have to swallow your own humanity for survival.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I learned in that moment was, oh, you don't see me and you're not interested in me. You're only interested in the labor that I provide, and it is time to go. And so I strategically planned to leave and to go someplace that would give me my title. And then I was given my title.
Mm-hmm. How long did that take?
It took me a year and a half from that conversation to get out.
Do you wish it would have taken you less time?
I wish it would have taken me less time, but it's also like market need and going to the right places. So what would happen is I would go in interviews and folks would say like, well, you're interviewing for this title, but you don't have that title. And then you can't disparage your last employer. Mm-hmm. So then you're kind of like, oh, well, they're slow to advance, but da, 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 da. And you're like trying to like dance around your, like the way you're being discriminated against, which like, it sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have the opportunity and the platform to help people navigate that now, which I love. And as an executive coach, I work with people often in that situation where they're like, I need to go, but they don't. So what's the advice that you offer to those people where they're at a year and a half, and they've not taken the action to do that next thing? How do you help them think it through?
I think that often, like when people are in doubt, that they will use excuse as the reason why, like they will use a lack of skills as the reason why they're unable to advance. And normally when you peel back the onion, it has a lot to do with worth. If it's not monetarily tied, like they need the money in order to survive, I think that often people don't understand their true value. And so they are waiting for permission from someone else to tell them they are worthy of something greater. And I think that when I kind of get to the heart of it, it's like, I usually find that people are listening to this like inner voice that has defined their level of success. And until they divorce themselves from that inner turmoil, they actually can't see themselves getting any place greater because they're in their own way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I'll often ask the question when they're in their own way, what is the worst thing that could happen? Give me the absolute worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And then once they say it out loud, they're like, oh, that isn't any worse than what I'm thinking right now, right? It's this, I have more agency over the choices that I make professionally than I let myself believe I have.
Yeah. I think that there's like a dogma that comes with like going inside the machine.
Mm-hmm.
And that we kind of inherit this understanding of our worth from other people. And I think that the people that penetrate success serve an eviction notice to those that understanding, and they're able to penetrate above their station because they just understand that it's actually not true, that like you get to define who you are and what your success is, and how other people feel about you is really none of your business. But it's interesting to me to watch people, like, it doesn't work in any other relationship. It won't work in your marriage. It won't work with children. It won't work with friendships. But then they go to work and they almost like divorce themselves from the idea of how relationships work.
Yeah. Yeah. It is so fascinating. And it's such a great point you bring up. And it's, whether it's a relationship or a marriage, like whatever it is, if you ask somebody who's left, do you wish you would have stayed longer? What's the response? It's always, oh, hell no.
Yes.
Right? It's interesting. Well, there's clearly been some very defining moments for you professionally, and I'm making that assumption just because of the passion and the energy you speak with. So I find it hard to believe that there are not some career moments there for you. But talk to me a little bit about when you sort of went, oh, I am really good at this, and people that have me are really lucky to have me, and it kind of helped change how you saw yourself in the business environment.
Okay, so I think that if I'm thinking about, I'm like, oh, I'm actually really good at this.
Mm-hmm.
I was working for a company and I was asked to stay. I was supposed to stay for 3 months. I ended up staying for 2 years as a contractor. And everything that they asked me to do, I did, and I did well. And then they were kind of like running out of money to put me on shows. And they were like, just hang around. And I was like, I actually can't take any more money from you. Like, it doesn't feel right. And then I went to a friend's company who was off the ground and he was running for 2 years. And I kind of came in and said, hey, listen, I think that things could run better here. Here are some of the changes that I think that you should institute. Propose a plan, identify what the next steps would be like. And then that person went on to change the way that his business functioned. It became profitable and he was able to sell it. And then I thought, oh, okay, so I do know what I'm talking about. Like, that was a really a pivotal moment. I think also being identified as someone who could scale Hello Sunshine and build out their physical production services, having a meeting with the then CFO, now COO, Liz Jenkins, and her saying to me, like, I'd really like you to come and help us build this. I had basically spent so much of my life kind of doing, like, I don't want to disservice like the shows that I worked on, but like the grunge work of unscripted television, and not being allowed in the room for like the things that I dreamed of and that I watched. And her seeing something in me and giving me the grace and the opportunity to build out something like quite intentional, it meant a great deal to me. And to be able to succeed, as well as not just like being welcomed in, was probably another like large highlight of my career. And then third would definitely be building Hugh, because the way that I say about Hugh is that I made my thought a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I spent a large part of my life like thinking about, like, somebody should, and then it kind of just sits in your brain and it doesn't go anywhere. And then you forget the idea because you scrolled on your phone or you had a conversation and you lose it. But Hugh tugged at me. And then because I created this opportunity for others, it then created the pathway to create so much opportunity for myself, because people could not believe that I created something from such a small place and was able to then get in the room with some of the largest studios in Hollywood. And so because I was able to have the vision for it and the discipline to be consistent about it, I think that it created extensive buy-in from my colleagues and my peers that were so impressed that I was able to execute on something that had just lived as a thought in my head.
Yeah. So I made my thought a thing. Like I'm definitely going to use that. I hope I have permission.
Yes, you do.
But I love it. I made my thought a thing, and it was, discipline, vision, execution.
Yes.
If there is somebody out there trying to make their thought a thing, the discipline, I get structure, right? There's a lot of things that they can do in terms of how they plan their time, so on and so forth. The vision, lots of people with great, great ideas. How do they, or what advice would you have in terms of how do they take the discipline, the vision, and translate that into something where they're actually getting shit done?
Yeah, I think that consistency is key, but consistency does not mean success. Consistency just means a commitment to trying. And I think that when people are trying to execute at a level, they only envision success, which then cripples them from the trying, right? Consistency is also a willingness to fail, right? Like part of the evolution of how I came to be where I am right now at 40 was making sure that I did not undervalue failure. Like I started making decisions, not based on whether or not I succeeded, but I made the decision because I felt like I wanted to do this thing and I was willing to fail trying, right? And so if you are someone who believes in something and you believe it can be a thing, you don't need to make it for the end goal of the confetti going off because you did it, right? You need to be the person that does it because you believe that it's worth something, and then you try. And then if it doesn't work out, it just means that you need to take another path or choose another thing. But you don't have to put all your eggs in one basket and then you're writing the ending before you even start when you only picture success, is what I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think you're going to be surprised by this. I'm a little surprised, but these words keep popping into my head, which are nowhere near what you're saying, which is fear and risk, which is fascinating because I hear you talk about challenges and I hear you talk about taking big leaps of faith. But ultimately, if I'm sort of putting my own stuff into that, it's like, all of these things that I did from a career and business perspective to get past the fear that was limiting, whether you're talking about leaving past roles, whether you're talking about moving your family from Queens to Los Angeles, whether you're talking about starting your organization and doing this thing that has impact, you talk about it in this positive light, which is action-oriented, it's focused on the future. But ultimately, for the average person, I think that translates down to, I got out of my own way, worked past the fear, and took that big career risk. Is that fair at all?
I think that that's really fair. I can tell you a funny story about us moving to Los Angeles. My best friend, she's a sister to me. We've been friends since we were 10. And I remember telling her, like, we're moving to LA. And then she was like, okay, well, are you gonna rent? And I was like, no, we're just gonna buy a house and then we'll just see. And she's like, wait a minute, what? Like, what if you don't like the area? And what if you don't but this is the thing that we would do. We would always be like the devil's advocate on the ear for things not working out. And she knew that there was a shift in me because I said, you know what? I'm going to pay my dumb tax and move on. If I make the wrong decision, I am willing to pay the dumb tax for this decision. And then I move on and I don't become my own executioner, right? For wanting to try. And I think that like, part of it is just like, I think that fear is like the horrible thing that keeps the world from being truly what it's supposed to be, because there's so many people that want permission to be they want fear to give them permission to be great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's antithetical to fear. Like that's not what it's there for.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned the world and the bigger scale, but there's a lot of stuff, for lack of a better word, happening in the world right now. It's hard to get past that fear. It is hard to be the boss. It's always probably been hard, but I think it's harder. When you think about the world right now, what it is you're trying to do, how do you reconcile those things?
I think it took me a while to get here, right? Because again, it's like the story that is told to you that you're supposed to just like inherit about what life is supposed to be. That I realized this is going to make me sound like nuts, but
I like a little nuts every once in a while. It's great. It's great.
I realized that when I'm listening to people talk, I no longer hear their conversation, but I listen to how much people romanticize life, right? Like everything is like something that Mickey Mouse can come out at the end and go, goodbye, boys and girls. Like I really think that like, you have to understand that you are going to have the highest moment of your life, and you might have a friend that's going through a divorce, that you might be at the most devastating part of your life because a loved one has died, and have this amazing job opportunity at the same time. And that life is really like this beautiful bouquet of it all. And the only thing that matters is how you are in your understanding of what life is. But I think that like the definition of who you are is how you are in your worst moment, right? Mm-hmm. And if you can give kindness and you can understand that it just is like this, it's all happening at the same time and once, and it's supposed to, then you won't live your life in regret. You won't be holding on to the story that you told yourself about how it was supposed to go. And you just let things play out the way they're supposed to play out without being married to the story of what you told yourself in order for you to do it. Like, I think that the most beautiful part of life is the not knowing.
Mm-hmm. So how does that translate to you being the boss?
How does it translate? It allows me to allow people to be human, right? Mm-hmm. Me being the boss is me being vulnerable and saying, I actually don't know this, but I know who to call. And I would love to hear what you have to think. I think that me as a boss is not being the first one to speak, right?
So how often does that freak your team out?
I think that like people are always looking to me to be the first one. I'm like, oh, no. I want to hear what you have to say because I respect power. And I know how it works. And I often say, like, when I'm doing my DEIA work, is like, be a student to your power. Yeah. Be honest about how it works in the room and respect it. Right. And so often I'm looking to my team to tell me what it is that they think, because I know I don't have all the answers and I don't want to have all the answers.
Yeah. And nor should you. Right.
Nor should I.
Yeah, there's, I think 20 years ago, 30 years ago, there was a paradigm that the boss, the leader, was the smartest person in the room, the person that we needed to defer to, the person we needed to follow blindly. And there has been a lot that's happened that told us that that is all very, very wrong. Yes. And if you lead that way, you're not going to lead for long.
Yeah, you're also like living in an echo chamber. Like when I talk about responsibility power, sometimes I'll use the story of like, I like to use Oprah because she's like the reason why I'm in film and television. I will say this time and time again, that she has so much power and she's like this person who changes people's lives, but she could walk in the room, look at a green dress and go, I don't like that dress. And then her team, because they never want her to be disappointed, make sure they not only remove that dress from her life, but then can be messaged that she doesn't like the color green. And then she can go her whole life and never see the color green again because she has that much power, right? Mm-hmm. And so if she is not careful with what it is that she delivers, and she doesn't have a curiosity about why did I stop seeing the color green back in 2011, right? Then she will never be able to have the checks and balances for her own power and respect what it means for her to say no, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that like when you are in a position of power, you have to honor the responsibility of it and trust that people are relying on you for what it is that they should do next. And if you live in a world where you only want to hear your voice and you only want to have people repeat back what you think, then you're not a leader, you're a puppeteer.
Yeah. Yeah. Which we tend to read about pretty often, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, two words that jumped out to me, impact and power. And I don't think you'd be comfortable, I'm making an assumption again, but I don't think you'd be comfortable for me to say you have impact and power, but you do, right? So what is your organization doing with that impact and power? Because it sounds like you're doing amazing work in the industry. So talk to me a little bit about how it's showing up, how people are seeing it differently, how you're helping people.
So how it's showing up is in sometimes like in the small details of me speaking to one person one-on-one, saying like, don't quit. I know it's hard. I know it sucks, but it's worth it because you want to be here, and stop worrying about what success looks like to everyone else and care about what it looks like to yourself, which is the phone call that I just had the other day. Okay. And then on a large scale, it's me having conversations with networks and studios and saying like, hey, we would love to work with you to throw a bespoke networking event where we introduce you to talent that you normally wouldn't have access to. And let's talk about what their true worth is and what their qualifications could look like within your like 4 different shows. I'm doing something on September 30th that I'm like super proud of that's been sitting on my heart for the last like 9 months is I'm doing a Black Women Executive Wellness Summit where I'm curating a list of Black women executives and I'm bringing them together, and we're going to have a holistic wellness coach like come in and talk to them about how to use like wellness tools and to keep themselves healthy while navigating really difficult waters of sometimes being the only one in the room. And so sometimes it's as big as like, I was just in Martha's Vineyard on a panel and like having conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion, or it's as small as like having those conversations. And sometimes in the middle, it's my team and I trying to figure out like how to build curriculums for showrunners or producers and to leverage people who want to be allies and accomplices and have them come and like teach courses so that we can have people share in what they've learned and to not like hoard their knowledge so that other people can benefit and grow in this industry.
Yeah. Diversity, equity, inclusion has been something that's been talked about, at the appropriate level, probably never, but headed in the right direction in a real way. The organizations, the networks, the production companies that you work with, are they caring about it enough? And is it real? Or is it something they do because they think they're supposed to? Help me sort of just get the behind the scenes to that with it, whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, I think that there are enough people that care in this industry. I think there are people who cared before 2020. And then I still think there's still a long way to go. Absolutely. I think that whether or not it's real, only time will tell, right? I think that like one of the things that is interesting to me is watching people say how important it is, but not declaring it as a business imperative and putting it in the same space that their EBITDA resides, right? And so they might message to me how important it is, but there's one person on their DEIA team, right? But there are 15 accountants that can handle the company's finances, right? Yeah. And there's real effort in their marketing team or like their production team. And so I think people, because they don't know how it ties to the bottom line, are sometimes apprehensive to truly invest in it because they still view it through the lens of charity work, which is part of me being a disruptor, is saying like, this is not charity. This does impact your bottom line.
In a real way.
The problem is that you want to put racism in the microwave, and when it pops out in 2 minutes, you want it to be justice and inequality. And I'm saying to you that it's more like a 401k, that like with consistency and time, the compound interest of your investment will yield results. And you need to be willing to invest in it the way you do other things that you allow to give time to grow. Yeah. That because it has the complications associated with race and how complicated that history is in the US, that is not something that you are going to be able to yield results for in 3 months or 6 months or a year. You're going to chip at the bit, right? But you're never going to make these grand sweeps, because if you can solve for that in your company, then you just solve for racism in America.
Yeah. And when you have that conversation, how do they react?
I think that most people are actually receptive. I have like a really good history of working with amazing people that are like, we get it. We're here. Let's try. I just did a beautiful rollout with Warner Brothers Discovery, and they're doing amazing work in DEI. And then one of the most proud things is I had a 1-year relationship with National Geographic, and we did some really meaningful work that shifted conversation and changed the way they saw who was qualified versus who wasn't, and had a dedicated team that showed up to the calls enthusiastically and showed up and like did the work consistently. And now it's been like 2 years since we did that, and they still talk about the work that we did together.
Yeah, that is amazing. Huge kudos to you. When I was at USC, a colleague and I helped run the consulting arm of the Center for Effective Organizations at USC for 10 years. And a research scientist and I started what we called the ERG Summit. And it brought ERGs together to say, this isn't about after-hour cocktails. This is about bringing groups of people together to impact the business in a very real way. This is about doing and creating these business, we call them business groups. We tried to transition the name to business unit groups, just so it impacted the business a little bit more. But one of the things that we tried to do was get organizations to understand how, in a very real way, these ERGs can be impactful, how they can help drive content, how they can help with hiring decisions, how they can create policy, how we can utilize them in a way that is meaningful to the business and meaningful to them, and everybody feels like they're impacting something real, right? And often, organizations would come at it in this is something we know we should do, and we're willing to do, but we're not quite sure it's going to be impactful. And I found myself having that be the door that was open just a little to say, that's good enough, and we'll get there. And you're so much further than that, which is great. Yeah.
What I would say to most organizations is just like, it's not an elective, it's the core curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
And that the moment that you allow yourselves to the moment that you're treating it as an elective, then you allow yourself to take it or not take it, versus like creating a space where there is accountability that is measured, and then you get grace. Then you get to retain your employees because they understand that you're doing the work. And it's not about perfection, right? It's about the pursuit of trying in a meaningful way that isn't performative. And I do think that it's a really interesting dynamic to watch people who are like supremely educated fail in this regard, and to remind myself that we were raised not to see one another. So you're trying to incorporate humanity into business models, and they just can't see the dividends of it. But, like the problem is that like, the saying is you can't manage what you don't measure, and you don't measure what you don't value. Right. Yeah. And so the human capital that exists in every single corporation, from the moms that need to miss the parade, the costume parade, to, you know what I mean? Like the dads that want paternity leave, to the LGBTQIA community that wants to see pronouns on the Zoom calls next to the name. All of these steps are the things that help people see that they are worth your time, right?
And you're doing a really good job of articulating that as a business imperative, right? This is not a fluffy nice to have. This is going to help your P&L in a very real way. And it even sounds like you're getting to a place where you're helping people measure it, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah. I think that that's like the key thing is I think that people just don't put it into their like EBITDA, right? Like, what does it cost for me to continually ask parents to miss out on raising their children in order to be here, right? Like the moment that people have buy-in to support the goals of the company is when you support their goals of what happens when they're not here, so they can actually fully show up for you as an employee. I think that listen, we all understand that as employees, we are commodities for the business, right? And like, it's not a charity. And I know that because I run one and we always need money, right? That you're a commodity for the business and your role would not make sense unless someone can make 10x off your salary, right? Mm-hmm. I think that I'm very clear on that when I go inside any institution, that the moment that my salary does not make sense for the role, then it's time for me to go. And I think that I'm fine to have that exchange so long as like you're not asking for my humanity at the cost of a salary.
And how many employers do you think could be better at that?
Oh, I think that so many people could be better at it. You know, I think that so many people could truly stop underestimating the power of allowing people to have space to be something more than your employee, that they actually work harder for you when you allow them to be something other than someone that needs to clock in for you. You get so much more buy-in when you give the graces of allowing people to like drop off their kid on the first day of school and to be there for the pictures and to, you know, at my kids' school, they call it coffees and tissue, or like coffee and crying, where all the parents get in the gym and they cry over their kids going to school for the first day. Like, that moment is important, and it happens between 9 and 9:30 every day. But if I need to be in the office to sit on a Zoom for a call that could have been an email, then you start to build dissatisfaction equity from the employees, and then they don't want to work for you as hard.
Yeah. So if I am a boss of a family-owned small organization and I'm hearing you and I'm inspired to put some humanity back into my workplace, or I am the showrunner on a show, or I am the CEO of a huge company, what do I do first?
I think the first thing you do is to ask people what they need. And that does not mean you're creating a democratic system within your organizations, because companies can't really function as a democracy, right? Like, all rights can't be equal, but I do believe that understanding what people need in order to function and to be flexible as a leader and actually caring beyond and be like, no, we know your kids are important. And be like, can you take this call at 9 p.m. at night? Like, you can't be a walking contradiction for your leadership. Like, you have to say out loud how it is that you function and mean it beyond your mission. Show it, like really show that you were serious about how important it is for people to have the little moments of their life outside of it. And that does not mean that you need to release deadlines or an assumption of obligation of duty. It does not mean that you will have ineffective workers, but you need to be especially in 2023, just be more flexible with your employees and trust that they will do the work. They get it done in Europe. I'm sure we could do it here in America.
I've always asked that question. August, my clients in Europe, August is non-existent, right? It's a thing. It's a thing.
Exactly. It's a thing.
Yeah. So you left Hello Sunshine to take some time to figure out where you wanted to go next and sort of get off of that wheel of performance. And not that you're not doing anything, because what you've accomplished is amazing and your organization sounds fascinating and high contributing to the world, right? But, and for you personally, leaving that job and doing what you're doing now and taking the time to, one, think and do this amazing thing. Number two, what are your biggest ahas, lessons learned for you?
I think that what I learned the most, I have to put it in quotes and say off, because I've literally been traveling nonstop and doing all the stuff that I can now say yes to all the time.
Nice.
I learned that I can't put a price on my time. Like, I love the idea of someone calling me and saying, hey, we have a space on a panel at Cannes. Are you going to be there? And I'm like, no. And then they say, but can you be there? And then I say yes. And then I book a trip to go to Cannes, and I'm able to go for 3 days. Like, that to me is like the dream, is to do the work that I love to do when I want to do it consistently. And so having my autonomy back and being able to create more than my intention, but like the impact of what I believe I'm good at has been immeasurable to me. because I forgot what it was like. I didn't forget what it was like. I've never been on my own time in this space for this long, and I will never forget it. So it wasn't about like what my next thing is. I think that like I've spent this time being really comfortable not knowing, and like leaning into not wanting to force the answer for the next thing so that other people can blue check my experience about my qualifications about where I belong next.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you gotten to the place where you've learned to say no? Because that was a big one for me as well. Owning my time and saying no, super fun.
Oh, I learned again. This is Oprah. I swear to God, I learned about the power of no like years ago, right? Mm-hmm. But I do think that like for people that I loved, it's always been hard to say no. I have adopted, and I am not the originator of this, but to listen to my instinct of only enthusiastic yeses. So if someone's like, hey, because then sometimes the no feels harder. Mm-hmm. But like if someone's like, hey, would you like to so and so and so? And I'm like, yes, then I go. Mm-hmm. But if someone's like, I'm like, oh, let me see if my calendar, oh, is that a Tuesday? Then I'm like, you know what? Let me think about it. I'll pass. And you know what also I learned that's probably one of the most important things is the power of the pause. That I don't need to answer everything immediately. Sometimes I can just say, hey, let me get back to you. Let me think about that and get back to you so that I can make sure that it's not my ego saying yes, right? Or some like failed duty thing that's working. Like I can honestly walk into it and say, I want to do this because I've thought about it. And I think that is a really good attribute to have as a leader, is to show people that it's okay to stop and think about it before you just jump out and answer.
It is clear that you're at the place where people want to be, meaning you're owning your own time. You're saying no. You get to decide what you're excited and energized by. There's a lot there that when I talk to people that they're working towards, they're striving towards it. They're there, right? They want to be there. What are the one or two things that people could take away from this show today that they could go do differently to make the first step to getting to own their own time, to getting to say no, to being and following their energy?
I think the gift that I gave to myself when I turned 40 was I started an eviction notice to everyone that was in my head. And I said, it's time for you to go, right? I wanted to make sure that I was the loudest voice in the room. So when I said what I wanted to do, I could say it from the place of a confidence that I'm not worried about what other people think. And I know that sounds like, but that's not like a plan. It's like, but it is, because we are indoctrinated with all of this bull crap understanding of where we should be and why we should be there, and to make sure that we have small talk for strangers that actually are too consumed by their own lives to really care about what you're doing. So why are you living for other people, right? Mm-hmm. And if you have to figure out, does your life belong to you, or does it belong to the moms that are in the line that want to tell you how they parent and you care what they think? Like, it's too much noise, right? Yeah. Like part of it, of you knowing what is even the next step, is allowing yourself to be still and allowing yourself to hear your voice, and to not judge yourself for what the answers are, to just try it. And then if you're wrong, allow yourself to be wrong, but then don't be your executioner because you got something wrong. Say, well, look at that, you tried, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, I once had a therapist who told me, you can't take care of something you hate. And I was like, oof.
And apparently nor should we.
Right? So, but it's like, the thing is like, how can you take care of yourself if you're spending so much time beating yourself up for thoughts in your head that aren't even real yet?
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating to me how you don't differentiate between your work life and your personal life and sort of what you value across the board. And you're so articulate with that. I think people really struggle to get to a place where they can do that well.
I think that most people want to bifurcate like who they really are from this professional person that they've created. And I think that what has worked for me for as long as I can remember is showing up as my most authentic self and not worrying about like how people perceive me. Because it's either you get me or you don't. I'm for you or I'm not. Like how you feel about me is none of my business. And so like when I get in the room and people get me, I'm like, hey, I'll stay a while. But if I go in a room and I'm not, I can tell that the energy is like off. I go where the love is. Like I know when to exit.
Yeah.
I don't indict myself for not being light in every space or for people not getting me. It's just none of my business.
Yeah.
Right. Like I also live my life. I once said to someone, it's just like, what's going to make the eulogy? Right. Like when I'm sweating the small stuff, it's like, is this going to make the eulogy? Yeah. And then I let it go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because you listen so much, right? Like I can tell you're present, you're thinking, you're listening, you're doing all those things and you want to hear. And at the same time, you block out the noise.
Yes.
That's a great sort of, I can listen, I'm there, I'm present, and keep the bullshit out of my sphere.
Yeah. I don't have time for it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I love every version of myself every day, even when it's hard. I love all of it. I love the failing. I love the succeeding. I love the trying. I love the days when I can't get out of bed because it's all me and it's all true. And I'm not ashamed of me living my life and whatever that looks like day to day.
I cannot thank you enough for walking us through your leadership journey. And I can tell how much people are going to benefit by how articulate you have been around what's worked, where you are today, and how you've grown from those failures, which ultimately is what every leader does. It's try again, iterate, and hope for the best. And I think you articulate that in a way that people can get their arms around, which is not that common. So thank you for sharing that today. And thank you for being on.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been wonderful.
Oh, it was so fun. We're going to have another conversation soon. Thanks, Bree. What I'm left with is, what are you actively doing to conquer your limitations, fears, and beliefs? Do you feel like your life belongs to you? And what's going to make up your eulogy one day? Lastly, how can you actively better value your time? This is Unfolding Leadership. See you next time.